a motion to approve exhibits A and B. Motion made by Board Member Megan Miller and seconded by Board Member Greg Schneider. Is there any discussion? Hearing none, all those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. Aye. Motion passes unanimously. We're on to 3A, our next meeting date. Our next meeting date is Tuesday. I think this is incorrect.
I think it's February 21st.
Yeah, it says Tuesday, March 7th, but it will be Tuesday, February 21st, 2023 at 6:30 p.m. All right. Is there a motion for adjournment?
So moved. Second.
Moved by Board Member A. Levy, seconded by Board Member Miller. Any discussion? Hearing none, all those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. The motion passes unanimously. All right, and we'll start in about 4 minutes. Public comment? Email and in person? Little or a lot? All right. We'll go with the email first when we get started. I don't know. Exciting.
Do you know where the public comment thing is?
Yeah, I think emails are home. Let me get right back into
Regular, yeah. So don't forget the little spiel. That's okay. Don't forget the little.
yeah. Okay. I'm going to call to order the February 7th, 2023 regular board meeting. at 8 p.m. And Mr. Shope, could I have a roll call, please?
Yes. Megan Miller, present. Greg Schneider,
Present.
Brian Anderson,
Here.
Amy Levy, here. Joanne Winfield,
Here.
Sean Levy,
Present.
and Spencer Anderson is absent tonight.
Is there a motion for the approval of the agenda?
So moved.
Second.
So moved by Board Member Miller and seconded by Board Member Schneider. Is there any discussion? Hearing none, all those in favor signify by saying aye.
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 Motion passes unanimously. I'll lead us in the Pledge of Allegiance. Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. All right. Well, Mr. Shope has informed me that we do have public comment. Before to read. All right. So first, our public announcement. The Board of Education would like to let our families and viewers know that our regular board meetings are also being aired live on YouTube for our Spanish-speaking families and community members. You can watch the Spanish translated meeting through the link found on the board website under the Watch Meetings tab with tonight's date. In order to accommodate this translation, we will be monitoring the pace of our meeting and speaking to allow time for the translation. I'd like to remind our board members and others speaking to please speak one at a time. Thank you so much for your consideration and understanding. And then as we begin public comment, we will begin with the email comments, and then we'll have our in-person comments. Norms for public comments during board meetings. Members of the public are welcome to attend all open meetings of the Board of Education. Robert's Rules of Order will be followed at all times. Individuals attending board meetings are expected to conduct themselves in a respectful and courteous manner that models appropriate behavior for our students. Individuals wishing to comment are expected to comply with the following norms in order to maintain a respectful and ordered meeting and to prevent discussion of confidential matters in a public forum. Comments should be directed to members of the Board of Education and not district employees, students, or other members of the public in attendance at the meeting. Speech that is belligerent, disorderly, disruptive, repetitive, or which exceeds the allowable time permitted for each speaker is prohibited. Concerns or questions that entail the disclosure of identifying information regarding specific students are prohibited. Response from the board, if any, will be limited to clarifying inaccurate information, seeking additional information from the speaker, or acknowledging that the speaker has been understood. The board will not debate with an individual, and the board may not take action on an item raised during public comment that is not on the meeting notice agenda. The chair will interrupt and rule an individual who violates any of these norms out of order. If ruled out of order by the chair, the individual's opportunity to address the board will end immediately and the microphone will be turned off. Thank you for your participation and courtesy. And everyone has 3 minutes for public comment unless they are being yielded time. All right, Ms. Shope, you read our email?
Yes. Excuse me. The email is from Angela Taylor, and her email is regarding the 23-24 school structure. And she says, when will it be decided on the structure of the schools for the next school year?
Okay.
And for public comment here in the room, I have Becky Wong and John Wong.
It's green. Okay, sorry. My name is Becky Wong. Do I say our address? 2719 Sharon Drive, Beloit. And I'm going to yield my 3 minutes to my husband.
Good evening. I'm John Wong, 2718 Sharon Drive. We are here tonight to speak about a true gem we have here in the district. That is our Beloit Memorial Jazz Program. We have 2 jazz bands, Jazz Ensemble and Jazz Orchestra. SDB students have the opportunity to begin playing in band in the 5th grade and to join the jazz programs in the 6th grade or anytime after. Band is a program that is accessible to all students, regardless of income. Students in band, and especially the high school jazz program, have amazing opportunities. They get exposed to numerous college campuses and cities throughout competitions and clinics. This year alone, they will have performed at Purdue University, University of Dubuque, Lawrence University, Mendelssohn Performing Arts Center in Rockford, and jazz festivals near Chicago and Sandusky, Ohio. Last year, when they attended the Essentially Ellington competition in New York City, the vast majority of our band had never been on an airplane before. These are significant opportunities and lifelong memories being created by these kids. Our 2 jazz bands just attended the Purdue Jazz Festival a couple of weeks ago. There were about 75 high school bands competing. Each band is assigned to a room where they compete against approximately 13 other bands in front of 3 judges. At the end of the day, a winning band, an outstanding section award, and an outstanding musician award are given per room. Our jazz ensemble won first place for their room. Our jazz orchestra tied for first place in their room, and one of our BMJO musicians won the Outstanding Musician Award in that room. The kids had the opportunity to hear performances by and attend workshops with professional award-winning jazz musicians, including Sean Jones and Wycliffe Gordon. A week from tomorrow, Jazz at Lincoln Center in New York City will announce the top 15 jazz bands in the nation that will advance into the Essentially Ellington competition in May. This event is known as the Super Bowl of Jazz for high school students and is hosted by the nationally known Wynton Marsalis. Our jazz orchestra kids and their director, Chris Behrens, have been working tirelessly to polish up their audition recordings and get them submitted. Fingers crossed, they make it. And if they do, it'll be the 11th time in the last 15 years that Beloit has represented on this national stage. Did I say that this is a national stage, all the states in the United States? Many of the bands that Beloit competes against there are private schools or public charter schools for the arts. The fact that we can compete against schools like these is a true testament to the dedication, talent, and hard work of both Mr. Behrens and our students. There are very few, if any, other programs in SDB representing and competing at a national level like this. And if they aren't chosen to participate this year, we will continue to celebrate them and enjoy their talents locally. We are proud of what has been created here by Mr. Behrens and what year after year continues to be a positive and successful program, offering great opportunities to many of our students. It is truly an extraordinary program within our district and something that sets us apart in a positive way from every other high school in the state of Wisconsin. I'd also like to state that at the Essentially Ellington competition, Beloit, for the last 2 or 3 years, I believe, is the only school in Wisconsin that's represented the state of Wisconsin. We invite anyone who hasn't heard the jazz band lately to come out to hear them free of charge at the Grand Avenue Pub on February 15th, so a week from tomorrow. The jazz ensemble will play at 6 o'clock and the jazz orchestra will play at 7. And I'll tell you, if you get there late, it's probably going to be standing room only because typically the place holds about, I'm going to say maybe 100 to 150 people, and it is always packed. It is a great program. I really encourage all of you, if you have the chance to come listen to them, it's a great program. So I think that's all we have. Thank you.
Thank you. Do we have other public comment? Mr. Schopp? So we are now to 3A Student Board Report. Let's see our board rep. 3B Superintendent Board Report.
Sure, I'll be very quick tonight. We have been working very feverishly as it pertains to our referenda here in the school district. Over the past month, we have, of course, at the board level, approved to move towards referenda. I know it sounds like it's been a long time, but that just happened about 2 weeks or so ago, and I'm very excited to note that we are moving forward with our referendum in both our facilities conversation and our operational conversation. Over the weekend, I have been really diving into that conversation a lot more as pertains to future conversations with the referenda. On our website, it has been updated to let the community know when we will have speaking engagements to really speak to the referenda, both facilities and operational. With that being stated, there's more meetings that will be added to the website. Naturally, we are waiting on some requests to come back. Not requests. We're waiting on some. What's the word I want to look for? We're waiting on some additional. We're waiting on additional scheduling opportunities with other outside entities to come in, and once those are approved, again, all of this information will be updated. Naturally, we also have been having conversations around our reconfiguration, and we'll have additional conversations about that tonight. And that'll conclude my superintendent's report for today.
Any questions? All right, here none. Committee and other board reports. Business operations and finance, teaching, learning, equity, and pupil services. Committee, governance committee, legislative update and policy update.
The business operations and finance committee met today. We went through the December financials year to date and discussed those and recommended that to the full board for approval. We also had our second installment on school finance, kind of school finance 101. Again, Mr. Duff is doing a great job of making sure we, continue to gain incremental knowledge in that area. So we all benefited from that. And that's about it for this week. We'll meet again on the 21st of February.
Thank you.
No report here. See you next Tuesday, 5:30, though, the next board meeting, Tuesday, the 21st.
Was that the governance committee next? The governance committee met on January 24th. We covered the 5 areas of our strategic plan, looking at items that the board may take action on in the future to kind of keep our conversation going about what board level work can be done to help actualize different parts of our strategic plan. We did look at our finance priority, our whole child priority, equity priority, engagement priority, and culture and leadership. And as we continue to move through the year, we'll continue to have those conversations so that we're giving action to the items that will help the district move along in its strategic plan at the level that only the 7 of us can do that work to keep things going. So that is our governance committee report.
So my legislative report is uploaded, but if you'll indulge me, I just wanted to highlight a few items. When you see AJR, that's new for these reports. It's the Assembly Joint Resolution. There's currently 1 resolution for the Assembly. I'll just read the question. It is banning the teaching of one sex or race is superior or responsible for past acts. So should school districts in Wisconsin be prohibited from providing curriculum or instruction to students that one race or sex is inherently superior to another race or sex, and that individuals by virtue of individuals' race or sex bears responsibility for actions committed in the past by other individuals of the same sex or race? So the Joint Assembly Resolution would like to have this question to be submitted for advisory purposes notices only to the voters in the state at the next spring or general election, occurring no sooner than 45 days after the adoption. So again, that is currently moving through the Assembly. On the Senate side, there are a couple bills I'll just highlight briefly. Senate Bill 23 is requesting the posting in a conspicuous location in a public area of school building signage that contains telephone numbers for the local county or state agency that is responsible for receiving reports and or conducting investigations regarding child abuse. Also, Senate Bill 41 is in the Education Committee requesting accessing or assessing pupils in 4K through second grade for reading readiness by November 15th, submitting that numbers of people identified as being at risk for reading difficulty by January 1st, and then DPI must submit the information it receives to the appropriate standing committee in the legislature no later than April 1st. I would just like to point out that this is a tracking system, that $500,000 is being proposed to help the tracking, but none of those funds have currently been designated to help the children that may be at risk for reading difficulty. So all of those are outlined. The links are included in the report. If you want to follow up, and our legislative contacts and their emails are included in the report as well. Thank you. Oh, for policy, up next, we met on Wednesday, February 1st and had a efficient and productive 1-hour meeting. We covered policy 761, wellness, policy 362, libraries and educational media, Rule 1 of that policy, policy 362.1, resource sharing, interlibrary loans, and policy 362.2, digital media use. Thank you.
Okay. On to 5, our consent agenda. Is there anything that any member would like pulled off the consent agenda? Okay. Is there a motion for the items on the consent agenda?
I move the approval of the consent agenda.
Is there a second?
Second.
It's been moved by Board Member Miller and seconded by Board Member Amy Levy. Is there any discussion? Hearing none, all those in favor signify by saying aye.
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 All right, the motion passes unanimously. And we are now at 6A, items for action and discussion. Before we begin with 6A, I need to make a disclaimer. So as we hear Dr. Garrison's presentation about grade bands, we will not be taking, we should not take action on this tonight. We'll just hear it. He's worked with a committee to create an understanding of our district situation. You'll hear with the information he's presenting. But the action that we'll take tonight is that we are just going to hear the presentation. We may ask questions. There will be additional meetings that will be publicly noticed and open for all to participate in, and notice of those meetings will go out. And then after that has taken place, we will consider and take action on recommendations that may come. Okay. So we're ready for a reconfiguration presentation.
My apologies. I just want to make sure I get the presentation pulled up real quickly here. I think I'm in the Google Meet though. But I'm already in the Google Meet, so current. Okay, so I will take us through this conversation as it pertains to our reconfiguration here in the school district of Beloit. First of all, thank you to all of the members of the community that are here today, of course, our students as well, for being here. So our reconfiguration, again, I wanted to just first start off with, and this has been shared publicly, and so everyone has seen this presentation, and so I will fly through it fairly quickly, but I also want to just bring notes to kind of some of the important conversations. Naturally, where have we been? I just thought it'd just be a nice picture to put on here. Nothing necessarily important there, but I thought it'd be a nice picture to kind of snapshot Beloit from back in the day. I know you guys see that little Volkswagen over there, and that is not 2023. So for some of the background and historical context, back in 2012 or 2013, we started this conversation around our grade band conversations, where we entered into a 4K to third grade conversation in intermediate schools, 4th through 8th grade. And naturally, we also had high school 9th through 12th. Naturally, there were some advantages of going to this idea, which allowed for much needed upgrades to many of our school buildings. But there was also some disadvantages of going to this conversation, because it was not necessarily widely accepted, because there was definitely some concerns in our community back in 2013 as it pertains to the 4th through 8th grade band. As we note that in some further slides as well. To continue with our background of historical context, we also began to study the configuration that we have here back in 2017-18. So about 5 years later or so, we started to look at, has this current grade band been working for us, okay? And so that was something that we wanted to take a look at back in, again, 2017-18. We determined that the current configuration was not ideal, even back in 2017-18. A proposed timeline was established and plans were made to really start the conversation around how we can reconfigure our school district. Naturally, due to some administrative changes in the COVID-19 pandemic, the reconfiguration at that time, 2017-18, was paused. And I say paused very cautiously, because we also know that, again, we all know what happened in 2019 as it pertains to our pandemic. And then, of course, 2 years after that, trying to recover from our pandemic was also a conversation. So where we are now, I think it's very important to note that when I ascended to the superintendent's position here in November, one of the things that I really want to do is I really want to take some data that we already had, as stated back in 2012, looking at where we came from, again, to moving into 2017-18, looking at, is this what we really wanted? Naturally, even back in 2017-18, and necessarily it wasn't a grade band configuration that we really wanted. Again, that grade band configuration was K3, 4-8, 9-12. And now, moving into November of 2022, 2023, I came in and started to have additional conversations around, is this the current configuration that we want to move forward with in our school district for the 2023-2024 school year? So naturally, one weekend, I conducted an all family and staff survey. I hosted conversations with community members and families and staff. I convened reconfiguration steering committee. I facilitated data dives on enrollment trends with stakeholder groups. I attended all school staff meetings at all sites to really talk about the overall implications of our current grade band structure. In those conversations, I did lay out some additional thoughts that our district has to contend with. We've had declining enrollment for the past 6 years, as you can see, for the past 7 years, as you can see here on this slide. This is the same information that I shared in December. In December, I shared this information in December to anyone who wanted to come out to hear some of the results from our reconfiguration survey. I also shared this same information with the steering committee as well. I shared this same information with all of our staff and also with our different buildings in our school district as well. And so everything I'm sharing here has been shared in multiple places and is not necessarily new to our conversation. We have had declining enrollment to the tune of about 1,797 students over the past 6 years. One could argue about 300 or so students each year. We also have had increased open enrollment out conversation, as we all note that we want our students to stay with us. That is very important that we just note that in general in this conversation. Naturally, as more students are leaving us, as we heard in our budget conversation today, that is a loss for our school district, and that also comes with a cost as well. Further pushes us into that thought around what we did not want to see as it pertains to our current configuration, which is K3, 4, 8, 9, 12. As you can tell, in the third, fourth, and fifth grade years are typically some very important years for us, because that is when a lot of our parents also start to, for whatever reasons, open enrollment out becomes a bigger issue. And one could argue that from the survey results that most of our families did not want their possibly 9-year-old going into middle school. And so naturally one could argue, let's get them out by the third grade. And again, these are all assumptions, but we see that this is a very higher, the numbers in third, fourth, and fifth grade did increase over time. Naturally, we also see that same impact in high school, which is something that we've also discussed as it pertains to our overall programming here in our school district. This is a very important slide as well, because as we've had declining enrollment, it's also important to note that staffing has pretty much remained consistent. Now, with that being stated, we also know that it's very important for us to really lay out the need for a grade band switch, which could possibly move more students back to the elementary schools, which these numbers could possibly level out, where you have an equal amount of staff to students. Yes, that would then make the middle school conversation a lot different, but that is where we will also have further discussions as it pertains to our reconfiguration. This was another trend that I wanted to share. This was also shared with staff members and the steering committee as well, that our 4K enrollment trends has also declined over time. And as you can tell, the 4K enrollment numbers are pretty important, because naturally you would want that number to stay high, because then that number, we would hope, would be the same each year over 12 years, right? And so if you have, let's just say, as an example, 500 students times 14, that'll give you a little over 6,000 plus students in your school district. And that's the number that we want to, of course, move towards, and of course, in the future. That 500 number that was, as it pertains to, that 500 number is also very important, because in conversations with the health department, the city of Beloit have about 500 or so births per year. Okay. And so we want all those babies who are in our school district who are born in the school district, who are born in the city of Beloit, to eventually come to our schools as well. And naturally what you see is about, of that 500 are born, 303 are coming to us as it pertains to 2022-2023 school year. The reconfiguration survey, I want to also bring note to this. The reconfiguration survey, we had over 1,377 participants, 477 additional comments, 321 individuals provided contact information, and responses included all schools and programs. I think it's very important to note that in this number, you have, close to 2,000 or so different opportunities for people to weigh in, and at how we believe, how the community believes, I should say, our schools should look different moving forward. And so naturally, in that survey, there was questions, and here are some of the questions as follows. I am, and of course, 41% recognized themselves as staff members, 39% recognized as parents groups, 12% recognized them as students group, and 7.4% recognized themselves as community members. Another question that was asked was, how satisfied are you with our current school configuration? Or in this case, 49.9%, 50% were noted that they were dissatisfied with our current school configuration. Again, that's K3, 4, 8, and 9, 12. Neutral was 31.3%, and satisfied was 18.8%. Now, naturally, as a school district superintendent, and I like to call myself chief service coordinator, that is not a number that we want to live here in our school district. 49% being dissatisfied with our current configuration, that does give us further further the need to further this conversation as pertains to where we should go moving forward. And so 3 options were put out to the staff, and I'm sorry, not to the staff, to the community. What configuration would you like our district to explore as an option for the 2023-2024 school year? And over 45, well, at this case, 45% wanted to move back to a 4K through 5th grade, 6-8, and 9-12 configuration. 45% of our families wanted that as their configuration change. 37% wanted us to explore the K3, K4 learning center opportunity, starting our elementary schools at kindergarten through 5th grade and intermediate schools from 6th through 8th grade. And of course, high school will remain 9-12. And then 17% wanted similar configurations that we have now, but the K3, K4 learning center will remain there. Our elementary schools will start kindergarten through 4th grade. That's the difference. And middle schools and our intermediate schools will be 5th through 8th grade. High school will remain 9th through 12th. And again, 17.6% of our families thought that, or families, community members who took the survey, thought that that would be an opportunity for us. But again, please note that the majority of our families, or who took the survey in this conversation, wanted us to go back to I'd say traditional setting, but a K4 to 5th grade, 6th through 8th grade, and 9th through 12th. And so naturally, with this information, I also wanted to, ask for people to share different thoughts, and the steering committee was brought to fruition. I thought it was very important to note that naturally I could have just brought a recommendation to the board and said this is what I wanted to do, but I didn't want to do that. I wanted to seek out additional thoughts from additional community members. Please note that the steering committee wasn't a judgmental body. They weren't making a decision for the school district. It was a way for me as a superintendent to just hear additional information as it pertains to where we are in the school district, as well as myself bringing and administration bringing different ideas to the table as it pertains to our reconfiguration. I just want to make sure I note that into the conversation. We, of course, had some guiding principles in these conversations, which everyone knows this. In every meeting that I've had, I've stated the same thing. We want to improve academic outcomes with a focus on configuration, on which configuration we could be ready for on or before August the 15th, with September 5th being the first day back for our students. And so whatever configuration we decide to go to, we want to be ready when everyone comes back to school. We also want to maximize our school capacity, as you have already seen. Naturally, a lot of our buildings do not have school capacity numbers, and that includes all of our schools, kindergarten through 12th grade. We also want to provide an academic program that best supports vertical alignment in students and staffing needs. One of the things that the reconfiguration could possibly do is help us bring resources back to the classrooms. And also, when you're making a shift in the school district as such, resources follow students. And so students if you have more students in the building, naturally the resources will be allocated as such. And so this was very important that we noted this conversation as well. And we also wanted to maintain fiscal responsibility. In this reconfiguration conversation, you can't get away from the impact that whatever configuration we go to, that it'll have on the rest of our school system, especially when the majority of, and actually in all of the opportunities that was listed, 4th grade will remain in elementary. And so there was going to be some form of change that we were going to be looking for. Okay. And currently, again, we are in a K3 system. And so whenever you're looking at these types of changes in the school district, we still want to maintain fiscal responsibility and sustainability over time. The highlights of the reconfiguration committee, I believe that it was consisted of community members, staff, parents, and administrators. We engaged in meetings all over the course of 2 months. I like to say over the course of 2 months, with the first conversation really happening in December, and then really we started conversations here in January. The role of the steering committee was to share ideas and thoughts and provide feedback. What did we learn? And again, this information has been shared publicly with everyone, and so not to read everything off of every slide, and so I'm giving a pretty much broad overview of each conversation here. We learned that we had declining enrollment, and again, it was very clear just in the presentation that was happening. The rate of open enrollments peaks at the third, fourth, and fifth grade was also something very important. Our staff and parents, well, were not in favor of our current configuration as reflected in the survey. And so it wasn't just an administration thought, it was a lot of people thought that our current configuration was something that they were not satisfied with. And we also, again, wanted to make sure that we noted that our DPI has continued to confirm projected declining enrollment. And so although you saw the steep decline in each year, naturally one could still argue, what is that going to look like next year? And based off of projections, we are still looking at a declining in our enrollment. My hopes is that we will eventually plateau this year, where we can actually say that we listened to our families and really move toward a configuration that supported their beliefs. I thought it was important, and again, this information was also shared with everyone, so no information was left out in different spaces. This is our school building capacity, and as you already saw this in a different slide, but this gives you building capacity numbers. Now, that first number there that you see is when we were looking at classroom sizes being closer to 15 to 18 students. Okay, and that second number there was what you will see when we increase our classroom to a more of a higher number, anything above 25. Regardless, these were the numbers that were given to us by our architects when we were in different configuration conversations. And so I needed to put a range there to let people know that no matter what you see here, we're not meeting as it pertains to this next slide. Let's just use Converse as an example, 316. Converse can actually hold, as you can tell on this slide, anywhere from 462 students to 600 students. Here you see Converse at 316 students. So there's room in our buildings to do a reconfiguration, and especially in this case, of course, K through 12, because we're underpopulated in every grade level. Okay, at every school. This slide right here, I thought was very important that I've also brought into the conversation, because if we were to look at shifting our middle schools, because middle school was one of the bigger conversations in our reconfiguration. If we were to shift our middle schools to look like a traditional 6th to 8th grade setup, the numbers are as follows. Cunningham would have about 251 students. McNeil will have about 275 students, 236, 285, and Virtual will have 22. Regardless, we'll have 4 buildings with very low numbers if we were to make a shift to my recommendation, which again further gives us the conversation to continue the reconfiguration conversation. And this conversation is really focused around grade bands, but you can't talk about grade bands without looking at this additional information. I also wanted just to note the, again, school building capacities at the, just at the middle school level. Sometimes, I could go back and do this again, but really this is the same slide here. But this is really looking at our middle schools. And our middle schools are fairly big middle schools. Aldridge can hold up to 1,300 kids. Cunningham can hold up to 975 kids. Fruzen up to 900 students. McNeil, 975, Memorial up to 2,300 students. And so our buildings have the capacity to make changes, regardless of what configuration we go to. So where are we going? I think it's very important to note that based off of the preponderance of evidence and listening to not only our staff and community, parents alike, it is the recommendation of the administration that for the 2023-2024 school year, we reconfigure to the following: kindergarten through 5th grade, 6th through 8th grade, and 9th through 12th grade being high school. All of the themes that I've talked about is in alignment with our strategic planning from an aspect of equity, culture, and leadership, whole child engagement, and finance. I want to make sure that everyone that is able to, of course, hear and listen in today, that this was, although this conversation happened, this conversation has been happening in the school district of Beloit well before me, well before I, came to the school district of Beloit. I would like to thank all the other conversations that happened here, again, at the board level, and of course, in the community level as well. But now we're at the point where we really want to move forward with a recommendation that supports what our district has asked for. I do listen to the community as much as possible when we have certain decisions to make. This was an easy one from the aspect of this recommendation because, again, for me, it's about listening to our families and listening to what our community is asking for and trying to make a move that supports that. And hopefully, over time, we'll see an increase in our enrollment, and that will align us with where we really want to be as it pertains to having our school buildings filled with all Beloiters. And I will ask for any conclusions here. Of course, the school district would like to thank, again, for input. As I just stated, it will be a challenge to make this transition, but with dedication of all of us working together. Again, working together is very important to me. This needed change for our district and community will be achieved. And I thought it was noted that since this is Black History Month, I added a comment here from President Obama, Barack Obama. Change will not come if we wait for some other person or some other time. We are the ones we've been waiting for. We are the change that we seek. And so that concludes my very high-level overview of what kind of where we are and my recommendation to move us back to a K4 to fifth grade, 6-8, and 9-12 system here in the school district of Beloit.
Board members, you have questions? Start with Board Member Levy.
I just have a quick one. The staffing versus current enrollment slide. If I'm estimating appropriately, we have about 5,200 students currently. In this slide, the blue represents the staff, the red is current enrollment. And it says that in all of our buildings, we have more staff than students. Mm-hmm. Is that accurate?
That is accurate.
So we have more than 5,200 staff in the district?
No, so when we look at this, it's proportional. So when we're thinking about proportional representation from a student to pupil, and I can have Mrs. Beavers explain that a little bit.
Okay, because on the site, it just says number of students. So I'm just looking at numbers. And the slide says that in all of our buildings, we have more staff than students.
Sure.
So it's staffing based on class sizes. So it's just a different way to read the graph. Yeah, we should have probably labeled it better.
Okay, so since it's not obvious to me how to read the graph, could you provide some assistance? How should I be looking at that graph?
So we're looking at sections. So however many students there are. Let's take a closer look. So, typically right now we're looking, 15 to 20 at the elementary level, and then how many sections we have. I'm going to need a second to just digest that question for a second.
No problem.
Overall, on Board Member Levy, as it stands, we have a lot of staff as it pertains to the number of students that we have in the classroom. And so for me, it's about pupil count versus our staffing. And that's how I look at this slide.
No, I totally agree. But this slide, okay, so I went to the one where we had like our enrollment numbers, and I just quick calculations, about 5,200.
Sure.
So if you're looking at the staff, those blue columns are taller than the red columns in all of the buildings. So that tells me that we have more than 5,200 staff members.
No. So we don't have more than 5,200 staff members. No, that's not what this slide is representing. I understand based off of how it looks, and like you said, we could have done a little bit better clarification. Overall, what we're trying to show is every building that's in our school district has enough staff in it as pertains to our student population. Mrs. Beavers.
Okay. So the blue line shows the number of staff we have in the building can support, for example, I'm looking at Converse, 400 students. When you look at staff to student ratio, we are staffed at Converse to support 400 students. We currently have, 350 or whatever the exact number is. Does that make sense?
The graph does not, but your explanation does. So a follow-up to this graph, if we're thinking about right sizing, the gap in between the red and the blue is the amount of appropriate reduction that would need to happen. Okay, thank you.
Board President Levy, I would
Go
like
for
to
it.
just apologize because I have to scoot for
Gotcha.
childcare purposes. I just turned off my mic. Just two quick questions. I want to thank you for the presentation and thank everybody who's participated in the discussion, like on staff and the community, parents, families, and certainly staff. So my two questions are, because I know a lot of people have questions, are what is your timeline for bringing forward specific recommendations to the board about like if and when a building or buildings need to close, and what that configuration might look like so that parents and staff have some clarity? I realize that we're not at this point this evening, but could you give us sort of a timeline for when we can expect that information and when you would like board input, I guess?
Sure. So right now, the first conversation is, of course, deciding on our configuration. As Board President Levy mentioned, that next week I'll have some additional conversations with the community to capture any additional thoughts as it pertains to my recommendation tonight. After that, at a later board meeting, the board can vote on the current configuration. And then from there, naturally, we will start having conversations around three major pieces. One, if let's just say the board decides this is a recommendation, there will be conversations about the current third graders staying in their current school, going into fourth grade, and then there would be a seesaw conversation. As I say seesaw, there will be a conversation with our current fourth graders who will be going to fifth grade next year, making sure that they know what school they'll be going back to from an elementary perspective, because we will be looking at K4 to fifth grade. Then in March, we will be having additional conversations around, actually starting after the additional conversations, I need to start having conversations around what this grade band structure implicates. And as I've already shown, that it does implicate that we'll have smaller middle schools, and middle schools will be impacted by this. And that is when in March we'll have conversations around what our school structures will look like moving forward. The board will need to make a recommendation. The board will, at that point, be at a point where I'll be making a recommendation based off of what I believe we should be moving forward with to the board by late March, early April. That'll give us an ample amount of time. I shouldn't say ample amount. That'll give us time to make the necessary adjustments for our school district so that we'll be ready for everything that needs to happen by September. Like I said, September the 5th when we start back school. There'll be additional conversations in April and in May as it pertains to transportation and what that possibly could look like. But again, those are future conversations that are coming. That this is just the pace in which we are at right now to make sure that we're capturing this first major hurdle, which is to decide what configuration we're going to go to, because that will, again, help us determine next steps moving forward.
I really appreciate it, and I'm going to raise two more issues that don't need a response, but I want to be transparent and put them out there for you and for my colleagues on the board to consider. My one question that I'm going to have going forward, but not for this evening because that's not where we're at tonight, is looking at what the numbers could potentially look like if we didn't seesaw our fourth graders, if there was like a phased transition so that the children who are currently in fourth grade wouldn't have to switch and switch. I want to explore the concept to see if it's numerically possible, just to reduce the transition for those children. And then the second question that I have that does not need to be addressed this evening, but I want to put out for the good of the group, is considering that there's a child care crisis in Rock County and certainly all of Wisconsin, I'm curious if we're moving to I know we have a 3K program. Just curious what potentially this configuration, if there are opportunities that it unlocks to potentially go into offering a 0 through 4 down the road for our families, and what like building capacity wise that might look like. I realize that that's far ahead, but I believe in forward planning, and I'm just curious if that's something that we could factor in as a consideration. So thank you very much. I appreciate it. And thank you all this evening.
Thank you.
Other board members? All right. Well, a couple questions I have then. One, how many meetings did you have with the committee, the steering committee that you worked with?
I had 3 steering committee meetings in January.
All right. So then also, I mean, this question has kind of come up at different times. When you look at that declining enrollment, you know, various reasons people may be leaving the learning environment, not meeting expectations, or people feeling that academic achievement of their own individual student, not what they want. But did you come up with any other reasons for the decline in enrollment given?
Sure. I also looked at our census data. A lot of our, just to note that there's declining population in the school district. I mean, in the city of Beloit, people choose to, you know, could choose to leave the city and move to a different area. That's also something to consider as additional information.
All right.
Another thing that one could argue is that we've had other options here in the district that's popped up over the course of the past, you know, 3 to 5 years. And that is also part of the declining enrollment conversation, because we have numbers that speaks to a certain our student population where they are possibly going to school at from an open enrollment perspective.
Right. And then so if you go back to that staffing slide, thank you for that presentation. I do know that sometimes we try to make things clear and they don't come out to be as clear as we think they are. But with that understanding that that level of staffing, it hadn't showed up on the thing, that level of staffing represents how many staff members we have and their capacity to serve versus the capacity of the building. We did have a conversation earlier in business operations and finance where we talked about, you know, if we say we roughly lost about 2,000 kids, that we were a district of like 7,500, and over the last couple of years, we've lost about 2,000 kids, so we're a district of about 5,500. And we've talked about some of our budgeting decisions that have been made over the last couple of years and getting to that space that, you know, the money for all the 7,500 students still comes to the district, but then it's sent out to the places where those students are. And that is a part of our conversation with our budgeting and some of the other actions that we'll have to take along with our decision to go to referendum, and that all these conversations are happening at the same time. So we do understand some of the things that you're laying out and some of the decisions that we'll have to make in March, April, and May, because if that means that we're serving less students, and this will be the first opportunity where information has been presented to us in a timely manner to make alternate decisions that'll impact the budget. And those things will be done at the same time as we're asking our community to consider a referendum for our operation and our capital needs. And then after that, there's still adjustments that'll be made, and we'll be waiting for the state government to decide what will be offered, and we'll kind of know those things as we get to the summer. And they make decisions as Board Member Levy has provided from the legislative update. We'll be able to track that and see, but we'll be making a lot of budget decisions in line with, as we're also informing people about what our needs are in terms of the referendum. So another question about no three middle schools, the high schools, 7 through 12, 6 through 12, that didn't come up anywhere?
No, it did not come up in any of our conversations. But what did come up was, again, the fact that we would have much smaller middle schools, and, you know, reducing down to 2 middle schools would be a definite thought that we would have to explore.
All right. So possible when we're looking at numbers and where things are at that, but like I said, tonight is not a conversation about what would be cut, but make a first decision about what the grade bands would be. So you're gonna have more meetings to discuss for public input?
That is correct. And so tomorrow you will see it, open conversations starting next week, Monday, Tuesday, and Wednesday. We'll have some opportunities as well. Would you like the dates and times for those? Possibilities.
Well, it'll all get noticed, so we can wait for sure.
Okay.
All right.
It won't get noticed if we're not there.
Right. So it'll be. This is also in response to the other matter that was sent in the email that there will be the meetings will be publicly noticed so that people are able to attend and public knows where the meeting is and what is being discussed, and everyone has the opportunity to weigh in. Yep. All right. All right. Any other board members with other questions? Board Member Winfield.
If you don't mind, I'll go first. I got a comment and a couple of questions. So, comment. I was one of those parents who was blindsided by the first reconstruction. It was hurtful to go to. I'm just going to calm out of my head. I want to thank you and your team for bringing this to us. So I had to go to Morgan, I had to go to Aldrich, Todd, which is all on the same side of town. Then I had to go to Hackett, and I had a freshman at the high school. So you could imagine what that gas bill was in that Suburban that I was driving back in 2012. So my questions, Dr. Garrison, one, just because a lot of people in the community are talking and they love you, I want to let you know that. How was the survey sent out? Was it just electronically, or did we send mailers, or did we have parents answer these questions at parent-teacher conferences?
I can have Mrs. Christopher answer that.
Thank you.
So the survey was sent out electronically to all of our families. It was also released to the Beloit Daily News, and the link was shared in there. It was on our website, and then we delivered cards with a QR code throughout the community to many locations for people to access it.
Good, thank you.
You're welcome.
If there's a possible, is there any way that we can reach those individuals who don't have the means of technology to answer these questions? Because I really think, and this is the conversation that I'm having. I don't own a smartphone, which is hard to believe, but they don't. They don't have a computer, and the only time that they're on Skyward is when they have an issue with their children in our school district. So I don't know if there's an idea of we can get something going to where we can either just try to get the parents a little more involved, and especially in surveys like this, because I think 1,300 participants is a little low compared to the kids that we serve in this district. That's just my opinion. Second question, I came to the board, not this board, because I love you guys. I came to this board, I think it was like 2015, maybe 14, and I asked for the study that they were doing at the time with the reconstruction and everything. How can I find that information? Because it was never shared with us. Is that possible to get that, Dr. Garrison? I don't want to put unnecessary pressure, but
I would have to look back at the board docs from 2012, 13 to see if there was any additional information.
Is that something I can do? I don't want to get my hand smacked, but I'm willing to.
We can dig. I can have Mr. Shope kind of dig and see if there's any information back from 2000. I know I don't have it. The information that I have right now is that our families are not happy with our current.
Yeah, we ain't been happy. I want to make that very clear for anybody who got any questions.
Yeah, and so that's kind of the information that I'm currently going off of.
Okay. Yeah. We haven't been there, and I appreciate your effort in this. I really do. Thank you.
Yeah, one of the things, Board Member Winfield, on the website, there are like historical documents that before we switched into board docs, we've got the old purple packets and the business meeting packets where you can find minutes of those past meetings and discussions and those things that were presented.
Just a quick question: when I go in there, will it show the board members that was on the board at the time? I just want to make sure we're gonna hold everybody accountable, right? Perfect. Thank you so much. I appreciate it. You know I'm gonna reach out. Thank you.
Hey. Wow, okay. Okay, Board Member Anderson.
So just a couple of thoughts. I think there's going to be people, probably most people, that none of us like change, right? But if our goal is to put the finite resources that we have in the right places to benefit the kids, some of the numbers that were shown tonight, we've got staffing to support 7,000 students, and we have 5,200. There's a mismatch. If we have building capacity up to 6,500, we have 5,200 students, right? So I think it's, again, we don't know what these changes are, but we know there's going to be some changes, and because there needs to be, right? So I think as Dr. Garrison goes through these, how many permutations and possibilities can we do to get to the right numbers on all of those? I would just ask everybody to be, open-minded and, hear out the rationale as he presents those recommendations, because they're going to be well thought out and based on data, because that's what he does. And so I just thought I'd throw that out.
Go to the mic. I'll recognize you.
Hello, can you hear me?
Yep.
Okay. I'm just wondering, based off of the data shown, how are those numbers figured that staff are able to adequately serve so many more students? Like, where are those numbers figured from?
So can you restate your question? I'm going to make sure I'm getting it correctly.
So the data that we saw that showed that we have so much more staff than students, or that the staff that we have are able to serve so much more students, how is that figured? Like, where are we getting those numbers from to show that we can serve that many more students within those buildings?
There's recommended class size, teacher to student ratios in policy.
Any other questions, board members? All right. So I think one of the other things to consider, and like I said, there was a concern from a community member about whether meetings were open and public because the superintendent chose to include other people in his deliberation process. So one of the things that we are doing is going to make sure that, like I said, we're just receiving this as information tonight. There will be 3 additional meetings for the community to have an opportunity to weigh in if there's more discussion. One of the things that, what people have to understand about this presentation and others is that we are at a point where we're trying to make change because we don't serve as many students as we used to. And so we'll have to come to a determination about what is the correct size of our staff. We've also initiated the conversation where we've explained to our community what our financial needs are. And so that's a decision that the community will make in April. Dr. Garrison has expressed how we will be making the presentations that explain what led to the specific ask that is being made of the community. And at the same time, when that takes place in April, we will continue to spend the month of February and March walking our community through some of the decision points. So it's important that our community, if you have an opinion to express, that you come to the open meetings and state them, or that you write to the board or call board members so that those concerns can be brought up. And then as Beloiters, we're all Purple Knights. We're going to make these decisions together. We are the elected representatives, but as we make these decisions, we are considering what does our community want. And so we will continue to put the information in front of our community and, make with appropriate pace and time for people to deliberate and shape the conversation so a decision can be made, and we have to move towards where we're going to be. So like I said, because the fact is we don't serve 7,500 students. Right now we're serving about 5,500. And it all falls back in line to where we're at, that we have a strategic plan, we have a superintendent, and now we're making some of the decisions that need to be made. We have created an understanding of the financial situation that we're in. And so we'll make those decisions together. All right. Anybody else on this topic? And we'll wait for those other meetings, and then we'll come back and be able in a position to make a decision.
President Lee, I just want to make sure I heard you right. Did you say call us?
Well, I mean, it's your phone number's on the website.
Okay.
Some people might, some people, including former board members and others.
Yeah, I think they should have called me. Yeah, okay. I'm willing to talk.
All right.
Appreciate it.
Yep. So our next item, open records request, charging for employee time.
So over the many years, we've been having conversations about open records requests here in the school district, and it has come to my attention that we have had this opportunity in the school district based off of our policy to charge for our open records request. And I don't want to get into like the history that when I wasn't here to make a determination of what discussions was made. The policy does states that we can charge for our open records request, and in a nutshell, we will start to explore our open records requests that are coming in frequently. And I asked for certain information because I wanted to know how much we were spending on open records requests, because naturally it's not just a request that we just go grab and then we send back to the appropriate parties and it's all said and done. It's time that's associated with locating these records, getting these records, vetting the records with our lawyers, and there is a large cost that's associated with that. Just to give a snapshot, from June of 2022 to November, we $36,000 plus, and just in our spending around open records requests. That's just in a small snapshot. If I was to go back further, of course, I can have more additional information around how much we were, spending on open records requests. It's a large cost because, again, it's not just, oh, here's a record, oh, let me just send the record, but it's a time-consuming opportunity. I say opportunity because it is something that's by law that we have to provide. Okay, and so we have to provide the request based off of what's in the request. But it does take time to locate records, time that our staff members have to put together certain documents. Naturally, according to state law, we can't charge for what's the word I'm looking for? We have to redaction. We can't charge for redaction, but it does take time for us to put together the documents to send to our legal for make sure it's done right, for them to take a look at it to make sure the law is followed, and then for us to get it to them. It's an expensive cost. And in the school district where we have been spending, a lot of money in various places, here's where we could just bring some thought to this question around, if we, in our policy, it gives us the right to charge, then we should be charging for it. We have not been charging, but now I want to make sure the board is fully aware that we will start to explore charging for open records requests.
Board members, any questions, comments? Go for it.
So, Dr. Garrison, so we have a policy in place that says we can charge, and for whatever reason, for however number of years, we have chosen not to charge. So first question, what does the policy say we do charge or we may charge? Because first I want to determine whether or not we're following our own policy for however many years.
So we may charge for our Ms. Show, can you pull up the policy on the part? Thank you.
And And then I guess while she's pulling it up, another question would be, you know, if we spent, let's just say it cost us $36,000 to do this work, right? That's a real number.
Mhm.
And I'm going to go ahead and kind of go to extremes to paint a picture. If we had 36,000 requests and we charge people $1, I could say, okay, that's a reasonable dollar amount for a request. If you say we've got, 1,000 requests during that time, and we're going to ask people for, on average, $360 to get that information, that's a different scenario, right? That becomes burdensome. So I guess I'd like to know a breakdown of what you think these charges would amount for a typical request, because then I'd say we need to maybe revisit the policy and then hold to the policy.
So every open records request is different, and I did do a little bit because everyone knows I like looking at information and data. I did look at this, and every open records request is different. Some take us a reasonable amount of time to get it done, and then some take us a much more time to get it done, because it's all based off of the request. It's not as easy as it is to just say, okay, everyone's asking for the same thing, apples to apples, reasonable request. The requests are all over the place. It could be requests for board conversations to meeting conversations to emails from 10 years ago to, I'm just giving you an example. It could be just implicating more than one person. So that's multiple dives into, information that would have to, of course, be redacted. And not only that, sent to legal for proper vetting, and then from proper vetting, then to the actual person. But someone here has to still do that. So the hours that it still takes is still a man time and job. I'm sorry, man or woman time job that it just takes a lot of time.
Does the policy provide for different charging depending on who's asking? For example, if you have let's say the newspaper is asking for something, that could be, I could see a business expense on their end and they pay something. But when you have a family member, let's say, that's requesting something that's pertinent to their child, even if that's a $4 whatever price that goes, gets attached to that, I don't know that that's appropriate. So I understand what you're saying. There's a lot of different scenarios that can play out, but I would just recommend a review. Maybe this policy goes through the policy committee and gets vetted out through what is our normal board process to come back to the board. I understand we have a policy out there, and I have no problem with following the policy as it's there, because I always agree to that. But I think if we think there's room in between, I'd like to see it go back through our policy committee.
And I guess my question would be, it can go back to the policy committee, true, but it still doesn't stop the overall time and cost that is associated with a large amount of open records requests that we get for sometimes just various random stuff that.
No, I get it. I think you try to, I think you try to say, things that are worthy and not worthy, right? There's a, but how do you do that, right? I don't think it's, who gets the right to wear that hat and decide what should be charged and what shouldn't, right? So I get that. I'd love to be the person to decide that, because everybody thinks they know the right opinion, but, I think we have a policy. I'm all for following it, but there's a certain cost to doing business as well. Every other municipality, goes through the same struggles. They have people that do it full time. And it's a real cost. So I think we just need to balance, our desire for transparency with, who could be impacted by it. And, I have no problem giving away for free for legitimate requests and charging people for what might be a frivolous request. The problem is, who decides that?
I think the issue then goes back to the law. Open records is the law that, and I can't go against, what people can come and ask for.
Mm-hmm.
So whether it's small or large, someone can come and ask for it, because that's the law, pursuant upon 19.35 in Wisconsin.
Sure.
State statutes.
So if you think our cost is, let's say, around $36,000 for this time period, right? What would our policy that's currently in place, what would that have generated to offset that $36,000 in cost? Any idea?
I don't have any idea for that. I mean, I would have to. I mean, right now we're not going to get $36,000 back. Just note that.
Right.
Our costs could only go up to not to exceed the total amount based off our policy. I believe $50. And so it's a nominal. I shouldn't say a nominal fee, but it's a fee that could be charged for that request. And if it goes over that, naturally we have to let the person know it's going to cost more than that. But an authority may impose a fee upon the requester for locating records not to exceed the actual necessary and the direct cost of location it. The cost is $50 or more. And these are the information this is some of the stuff that I'm just spitting out from our policy. And so if it goes over that, we need to let people know it's going to cost you more to get this record. But in most cases, one could argue that it probably wouldn't go that high. But again, I can't. What's hard is these requests are not just cookie cutter request at times.
More questions? More. I think one of the, I'm sorry, I didn't see you, board member Levy. Go ahead. Oh.
Okay, so point of personal privilege. As the policy chair, I'm cringing a little bit because I don't want to have a conversation about policy if you haven't read the policy. So I think we should put a pin in that. My recommendation is that when we talk about a fee structure that of course is in line with our policy and of course is in line with state statute, that we have categories of request. So we can't foresee every request that will come in, but if it is a category of request that requires redaction and legal consultation, I think that there should be one fee structure for that if we move in that direction. If it's a simple request, I want to see the whatever that's a quick turnaround, then I think the categories might help that. But again, I think we should put a pin in this until everyone has reviewed the policy so that we can have a conversation that's more meaningful.
I think, thank you. I think, so as we look at it as being an action for item or discussion, the context of our district and open records requests, we are about legal compliance and transparency. So we're going to continue to fulfill open records requests as they're submitted. Everyone is for sunshine in government. It is true that we have high records requests, but the records requests are what they are. We also have a policy. I think one of the things that I'm looking at in the policy is there is a part of the policy where it says that we shall charge, and I think the difference may be what we are actually doing versus what is written in the policy. So even before, like you said, before it gets to committee, I do appreciate Dr. Garrison bringing this to our attention, because I think what we're discussing is a change of practice that might begin to occur, or he's highlighting for us what's written in the policy versus what is actually happening. And if we move directly as the policy states, there will be a difference, and we should all take note of that. But whatever is written in the policy, that can actually be implemented because that is the policy. And then as it comes up, we appreciate you putting it on the radar. And if it needs to come up again, and we also have our legal counsel to kind of advise us in that space, that we'll follow our policies, and whatever questions come up after that as a result of us following our policies, we'll deal with those as they come also. But like I said, a policy committee is a space for that discussion, or just showing it back up on the agenda again. Anybody else as we move forward, because there's nothing else.
So just one final clarification in reviewing the policy. Okay. There shall be no charge for locating a record unless the actual cost exceeds $50, in which case the actual cost shall be determined by the record custodian and be billed to the requester. So if the actual cost is $1,000 and that actual cost can be documented per our current policy, that cost will be billed to the requester.
My goal in this conversation is to make sure that the board is aware that we have a policy that allows us to charge. That hasn't, I don't want to say it hasn't been a practice, but that's been something that has been a practice here where we necessarily haven't charged. I don't want to say what hasn't happened, but I can speak for while I'm here. And so while I'm here, I just want to make sure that people understand that based off our policy, we could charge. And Mrs. Borley-Levy, you are 100% correct. Based off of our policy, if it's that high, we can charge that back to the requester.
I think the other part, to look at the policy, there are costs, but the purpose of the policy is not to create a burden so that the record does not have to be produced. It's just there's a policy for what is and what can be done, and you're bringing it to our attention. So the community knows, requesters know, board members know, we're going to follow our policy. Use of switch for simultaneous interpretation for board meetings.
Yes, this is another conversation as it pertains to just looking at funds in our district and how much we're spending in our district as pertains to our simultaneously, not only just video in all of our meetings, but also we also translate. Thank you, Board Member Levy. We also translate all of our meetings in Spanish. Sometimes we have people in the audience or sometimes people are at home that listen in on the translation. But I have to be honest with you, and looking at that service, we haven't had the participation in which maybe this was put in place for when we were during the pandemic. And so over the past year, Mr. Soap, you mind pulling up that Swiss account, please? Over the past year, we have been, of course, it costs to have the Swiss come in, and naturally we appreciate the services that's been rendered by that company. But it does come with a cost. And we also want to provide the cost that's, how can I say this? The cost that we have is duly noted. But over time, again, we haven't had the participation in the meetings to support continuing the cost. This was something that was brought from the board, and I thought it'd be important that we bring it back to the board conversation because we also have other opportunities in which we could still do our translation through closed captioning. And so naturally right now, someone could be talking and it's closed captioning and in Spanish so people can still read it. Most of our communication is put out that way or in written form. And so we will still be able to, of course, have our meetings recorded. We'll still be able to participate as such, but closed captioning will cost us $0 versus a snapshot of about $26,000 over the past year to broadcast this conversation to sometimes no one on the other side of the conversation. And so, again, as I'm looking at cost in our school district and ways that we can possibly, have some savings, here's another opportunity for us to consider moving forward. And I will leave it at the board's conversation. Any questions?
I have a question. So if I'm understanding correctly with the closed captioning, when our meetings are being aired live on YouTube, it would just appear on the screen.
That's correct.
So for example, if someone came in person to the meeting, could we have devices available set up to play the YouTube video while it's being aired and they can read the closed captioning real time sitting in the meeting?
That is correct.
Okay. Thank you so much.
Mm-hmm.
Other board members, any questions? So just for clarification, so I understand, like I said, for the first part is because we want open participation for all in the public. Even if one uses it, then that's their right to that meeting. And these are the accommodations that we're trying to make to be inclusive of our whole community. So this does not take away a need that's being met. This is just a different way to provide for that need in a different cost structure, is what you're providing?
Correct. And so right now, someone has to come, literally be in the meeting, listen to what we're saying, translate it for the members that are in the community and or here in the meeting itself. And then, of course, this comes with a cost, naturally, if you're having someone do that for you. We do have closed caption where right now we could be talking and it's putting it in Spanish where someone could actually read it. Mrs. Levy have already asked the question as it pertains to can we still have that option here if someone comes and they can see it on YouTube? Yes. And so this is just another way of a possible cost savings.
And so how much do we spend on the translation?
26,000 as to date right now is $26,469 up until 1/20 of 2023.
Oh. Thank you, because I missed that. Board Member Miller, I recognize your hand now.
Hey, no, it's okay. Can you guys hear me okay? All right.
We can.
All right. Yeah, I tried from the phone and I don't think it was working, so I switched. All right. Hey, so thank you so much for this. I really appreciate you scrutinizing through our budget because obviously we want to put as many resources directly toward our students and our teachers as possible. Having said that, I have a real problem with this specific piece here. Closed captioning is something that I use frequently in my day-to-day instruction of students. I often use it on YouTube live, like you're suggesting, like for news and things like that, because I teach reading. And so I like to have text there. The amount of errors in the live YouTube broadcasts are noticeable to say the least. I don't think that I'm not willing to compromise on accessibility. To me, it would be like if I had trouble walking, instead of using a ramp, somebody like throwing down like the top of like a tote bin and scooting me up. I mean, like that's like to me, like the first thing I thought of when I saw this. It's really a poor substitute for like a credible service. And one of the reasons that we moved to SWITS is that we had an ad hoc committee of community members, staff, and parents that strongly recommended that this is a service that the district provide. My last point is looking at the cost there. The $26,000, like if I saw that correctly, that's going back to like 2021, and I believe you just shared that in a brief, what was that, like 4-month period, we spent like $10,000 more than that just in open records requests. I'm sure there are other administrative pieces that we spend a lot of money on that are, we could probably look to cut before we take away something that is like vital to community accessibility.
And I thank you so much. I really did consider that too, Board Member Miller. Naturally, I do not want to decrease the access, but this snapshot is because we don't have the participation in the room. There's not people logging on, and again, we're talking to in this case, sometimes one other person or nobody.
So can I clarify? Is SWITS?
Sure.
I'm sorry, my cat is really loud and meowing in the background. If you hear noise, I apologize. Cool. It's good night. So, okay, we use SWITS not just for our meetings though. I guess I just want to clarify, like when SWITS comes in to translate, that's something that can be made available live, but also like can be watched again, right? Like that recording is available versus the really, I would say, extremely inferior live closed captioning service that YouTube has. And like, it might not happen like here and there, but I mean, I guess I would just say if I were a parent that was impacted by this and like reconfiguration is coming up, and maybe I'm only going to come to like 2 board meetings, and I can't even follow along with what's going on in the meeting because I'm relying on this kind of like shoddy closed captioning on YouTube. That's a huge turnoff for me, and we have like a significant population in our community that this impacts. So again, like I totally and very respectfully see where you're coming from, and I know that it might seem like, oh, it's only like a person here and there, but we can't predict like who and when will show up, and I just feel like it just doesn't really honor like that population of our community to cut this out.
And again, I don't disagree with your statements. I just know that over time, the participation just hasn't been there. And so again, it's just hard to argue. I'm not saying hard to argue, but it's just something I need the board to understand, that we are paying for this service and with little to no participation. And it's something that we need to just think about. And that's why I'm bringing it to this conversation at the current time.
Right. There are other board members with questions or comments.
I also like to know all the rest of our information that we share with our Hispanic population or Spanish speaking population is in print form. It's not in, we necessarily translate it every single time, but the majority of our information is in print form, in written form, I should say.
Quick question. Is there a way to not necessarily use YouTube closed captioning, which may have some concerns there with accuracy, but do like a third party translation that is more accurate?
That is something we could explore. We have been exploring that over a few meetings to see how accurate it's been, and it has been accurate. But again, nothing is, I hate to say nothing is perfect because my English is sometimes not perfect, but that is something that we can look into, board member leave, to see if there's another service provider that we could look into for possibly doing it for free.
So I would kind of, for this item here, we'll just take note that we've had a discussion. I think as has been shared, that all the members of our community are important, and even as we're making decisions about utilization, that we'll keep in mind, making sure that we're meeting the needs of our community. So in the in-between, it's been brought to our attention, can continue to cost out things and provide scenarios for us to consider. And then, like with a lot of budget things that we have to come up with, different decisions might be made at another point in time.
Also, I'm sorry, I have to note this, that I call him Dr. Tulio. He does participate in our meetings. He comes and participates. And if someone is, needing that translation, he's here. Oftentimes he comes and sticks around for, 30 or so minutes. But again, no one's here. Of course, he has night responsibilities as well, and he, of course, has to leave. But he's here for additional support in translation. At every board meeting, he comes to. But if no one's here, then, of course, he leaves. Because, again, this is a time-oriented conversation. Thank you.
Board Member Miller.
Yep, just want to clarify, are we paying Mr. Duran for his translation services at these meetings when he comes?
He's a salaried employee, and it's part of his job responsibility as parent liaison to our community. That's just part of his overall, I shouldn't say pay scale, but that's part of his responsibilities.
Okay, thank you. I just wanted to clarify because I just know, like, I've worked in other, not in our school district, but I've worked in other, like, professions where employees that are bilingual are expected to do interpretation for free, and it's really a disservice because it's something people should be compensated for. So I'm very happy to hear that we're compensating Mr. Duran for that. Thank you.
Correct. That's in his role. Thank you so much for the question.
D, budget update.
Good evening. This is the second of the budget updates that were started last month, And I did typically the budget update is about an update on the development of next year's budget, but I intentionally phrased it as budget update so I could include a budget update on the current year budget, and then I'll go to the budget tracking report. The nice thing about usually the finance person is the one giving bad news, deficits, everything's tough. We got to sharpen the pencil. But this is this budget update about our current year budget is I actually have some good news. So we do monitor the current year budget to make sure we're on target. And recently, Superintendent Garrison and the team put together a review process for staffing. I think this was discussed with the board. So the cabinet and team reviewed current vacancies and put a hold on filling a number of positions. And so we wanted to report that this has saved the district over $1 million by putting many of these positions on hold. In addition, they also reviewed some positions that we don't expect to include in next year's budget, so that will also reduce staffing costs in the budget next year as well. So this is progress, and it would reduce our budget. So then the other area, we met with our health benefit consultants and I asked them to do a cost trend run out of our current year health benefits. And now this is highly variable, but we went over this, and they saw that we're having I don't know if this is, I'm trying to figure out the best phrasing. We're having a good year as far as costs to the district's health plan. That means that we have fewer people needing significant health procedures, and which is good because we have a healthier staff. So we should also experience noticeable savings on our health plan. So when you combine those two, to make a long story short, this should help reduce the shortfall that we have budgeted at about $4 million so that in our current budget, so that should be lower. Now, this is a snapshot in time, and you could have things intervene that could also bring back those costs, but this is so far we do anticipate some savings. So anything else to add on that? So.
Sure. I mean, as we've been talking about savings over time, we've looked at, contracts, we've looked at staffing, we've froze some hirings as it pertains to kind of where we are right now. We're looking at many different budget lines. And so to me, this conversation tonight, or our board meeting tonight, and the information I'm bringing to the board tonight is, again, my way of really taking a deeper dive into our financials and seeing looking at possible ways that we can save money here in our school district. Naturally, when we're saving money in our school district, that means the more money is put back towards supporting our students and staff. And so as we continue to do that, again, over these next few conversations, even with the reconfiguration, there's going to be additional possible savings that's going to come up through these different conversations, including, things that we know, and possibly things that we haven't seen yet. And so there's going to just be different opportunities for us to have savings, even when it comes to looking at our school district as a whole from a staffing perspective, which was noted. We're looking at all those themes to see where we can possibly save.
May I?
Yeah.
Thank you. So Dr. Garrison and the team, thank you for keeping an eagle eye on the budget. And it may be a good idea to keep a running list of those cost savings that we've actually realized, because I think that that's something that we definitely want to share with our community. This is how we're using our resources wisely. And then these are all of the areas and ways in which we are saving money and redirecting it back to our classrooms, back to our students and our staff.
Sounds good. We'll take note of that. And I always keeping track of all that stuff. So any other questions on current year budget? Okay, then I wanted to this is the budget assumptions tracking report, month number 2. I don't have too many updates, but as part of this budget cycle, we're getting into the area of where the leadership team will be defining strategic priorities for the upcoming year. And soon we'll be putting together the packets and processes for having departments begin to work on their budgets. That will be starting soon. But I did want to mention that during the last meeting, President Levy, you were saying, please put in some decision points in this tracking report so that you have a better idea of, at what points will there be some board intervention or input needed. So I did include that in here. It's so one of them I did put in is in June. I put it all purple. I used a lot of purple because of the Purple Nights thing, and
I noticed that. I got purple tie on too.
So this year we're hoping the plan as part of the budget schedule is to have an interim budget approved in June. So I put that all to show you that's a major board action, adopting an interim budget. And then there will be some preliminary meetings with the board as to the structure of the budget and how it was put together. But there's some other decision points. One of them is that I have in the ESSER in April, I have 2 decision points. We're waiting for the referendum results, and we have ESSER funding is a matter that would be changed, the planning for that, dependent upon the referendum results. So that I put down as a decision point at some point, be changing some of that use of the ESSER funds in April. The other thing is state budget action will be concluded hopefully in July. So I don't have that in purple. It's more of a color like orange. So the state budget action has a significant impact on the district's finances. It's a huge question mark for the district. So, so then what we would recommend is that we would make significant changes to the budget based on state budget action. We should know some preliminary information about state actions maybe in May, but that's very preliminary. So those would be some times when you'll see significant changes. But the other thing is because of the uncertainty of the state budget, I put in here, and this can be changed, but a decision point on employee compensation should be on hold until clarity on the state budget is completed, which would be probably closer to when we have more clarity on what the state budget action will be. So compensation is a major aspect of the state budget. Just to put it ballpark, every % adjustment in compensation would be about $500,000. So if we give it 2%, that's about $1 million. 4%, $2 million. So it kind of adds up. So that isn't included in our budget estimates. So just keep that in mind as we work towards that.
Repeat that one again. Every percent is $500,000, you said?
Yes.
All right. So like if CPI is 8%.
That's like $4 million.
Okay.
So and that's not in, so at the bottom line, I currently have we're at about a $5 million shortfall to resolve. That would add $4 million to that. So you can calculate on your own. This is a good math item for
problem-based learning right here.
So.
But it's also noted that I know we have a shortfall, but we are doing things right now. Again, I just want to make sure everyone is on the same page where I'm at. We're doing things right now that could possibly put us in a balanced budget before the end of the school year. And that's what, when I came here, that I wanted to make sure that we just didn't talk about, that we actually start moving on some of these different recommendations. And so I appreciate the board and the considerations as I bring certain opportunities to us to save money for consideration.
Yeah, exactly, and then the state action will also, it's likely we will get additional revenues allocated by the state. Another decision point, and as an example, in the next budget tracking report, some of the staffing savings that we've identified that I just did identify as part of the current budget, I'll reflect in here the projected savings from that in March. So we already have some planned savings for the budget in that area. So there is one final decision point I wanted to bring to you that's actually right here in this month is we did meet with our, this is about employee benefit costs in the health area. So in meeting with our consultants, if we are going to make any changes to the benefit plan, it has to be done in a timely fashion so it's implemented for September. So we have to have an earlier discussion on that. There are some options that could be considered for budget savings that would maintain a competitive plan while avoiding the impact on employees' annual out-of-pocket costs that could also provide a cost saving. So before we contemplate that, we wanted to have bring this to the board's attention and have a discussion as to whether or not these are some areas that should be pursued.
So just a question. So I'm looking into February and I see a decision point. And so today is the 7th, like the next meeting is 21st. So we would be making this decision in February?
So there are some, I don't know, Dee Dee, do you want to help me on this? So there are some discussions we have to begin to have on those possibilities that it would take some time to work into a plan design change. So we have to start those discussions soon. I don't know if you're actually deciding on the change other than saying, yes, we believe it's a goal to seek some savings in this area, or is this an area where it's more of a...
The thing that I was going to add, I think for speaking for us, and we're all here so they can chip in also, is that the norm that we have tried to develop in our committee work is that we see something, have the opportunity to ask questions about it and gain an understanding. And then the second time we see it is when we take the action. So knowing that, okay, today is the 7th, and if this is a decision that should be made in February, we have had special meetings before to accommodate that. But just that as we're continuing to bring, and Dr. Garrison is working with us also, but just in terms of how we're structuring the conversation, like if there's actions that you need the board to take so we can be in a timely manner, just try to work it into that format that we have the opportunity to have the presentation and understand what we're being asked to do, time to deliberate, and then come back and then actually make our decision so that we can continue to help the district, move forward and not, because some of these things you got to make decisions so you have a fixed point and then keep moving down the road. And we want to be able to provide that, for the team, and the chart and the colors are helpful.
Okay.
All right.
Yeah, and I apologize for the late decision point adding this. We just had a meeting last week.
You're only here 2 days a week, man. We all right.
And then they're like, well, you really have to make this soon. So I'm like, oh no. So this is where we're starting the process of engaging the board on this. So.
No, and this is important to us because this, like as we said, this is just, it helps us to do the work that needs to be done for the district. And that's the other part about, again, as we're trying to demonstrate to the community, we made decisions to go to referendum because we demonstrated what our financial need is. And we're also taking steps to save money in this year's budget and next year's budget, but we're doing things. And like I said, when the community goes to the ballot in April or even before, because there's early voting, you'll see the things that we are doing in February and March and April to go along with the realities of what our numbers are and where our finances are. So that's important. I'm going to add another question about, so employee benefit cost increase or decrease, and like kind of heard what you, I know like at times, sometimes employees need to use health insurance, and it's not just the employee, it's their families also. And why do you have health insurance? Because sometimes people get, and so in some years there's high catastrophic use, higher utilization. So where are we kind of at this point? And then have we had those conversations? You said you had conversations with the benefits consultants, and of course they're giving us options of things that we could do that could increase or decrease what the cost is to the employee versus what the savings is to the district. And have you had those conversations? Are you beginning to have those conversations with the employee groups and their representatives so that they understand what might be happening?
Yeah. So this is a partnership with Dee Dee here, so.
Having a functioning team and all the people in place helps. Yeah.
Did I turn it off? Sorry. So what we're doing is gathering information and trying to see what options exist. Our next step is to ensure that we engage our BEA, for example, and make sure that we present that information and gauge from them what impact they feel it will have on our staff and how favorable it would be to move forward, so that we can then come back to the board and present what those outcomes were from their feedback. Excuse me.
And then obviously too, if we've got about 850 employees, but based on our numbers, if we end up with less than 850 employees, the impact to what we're doing is different. We kind of talked about that last year with the compensation study, that we set up a new compensation plan, but at some point in time, there might not be as many people benefiting from that compensation because appropriately the size of the workforce has been structured to meet the student need that we have existing.
Correct.
Okay.
Thank you.
All right. So is that kind of the outline of what the February decision is?
Correct. Yeah, we'll discuss this further and then bring it back to the board.
Okay. And then just the May-June decision point on employee compensation adjustment, that is like what CPI might be, and if we're going to be able to offer the full CPI, or
exactly
what agreement we might have.
Exactly.
All of those conversations are, of course, in conjunction with the BA, and so naturally, when we start thinking about that, for me, it's really about making sure that we have constantly had the conversation so that people at least know where we are and what we can do, and what we can't do. You know, I think that's a part of the conversations. And so not hopefully, we know that in the next few months here, we will be having more conversations with our with BEA to kind of start these conversations moving forward. There's also conversations out there around, you know, possibly early retirement conversations that we have to start having as well. All of these possible vacancies that'll happen when we talk about some of early retirements also looks at a reduction of staff and how that can actually impact us overall in our budget.
Any other board members?
Just a comment. I'm glad to see that you have included both on the enrollment and the expenses, the students that are open enrolled out or through charter school enrollment and voucher enrollment, and the cost, just partially so that the public, when you look at this, to understand that the school district gets the state and federal funding for all students, whether they're in open enrollment out, or the charter school, in which that money then, almost all of that immediately gets fed back out to the open enrolled and to the charter schools to cover those tuition costs. So while it is shown as income for the district and expenses, it really doesn't have anything to do with students that we are serving currently in the school district of Beloit. The other thing to understand is, I know we've talked a lot about special education funding. And we get money from the federal government, which is called flow-through dollars. But it's important to understand that 10% of that money that comes from the federal government, we have to then spend on non-voucher parochial schools to provide special ed services there. And also that there's about a 15% of that that's set aside to main efforts to provide supports for students, hopefully to keep them from being enrolled into special education. So if we look at that, out of the federal dollars that we have coming in, 25% of that is going into programs outside of special education, which is a big chunk of those dollars.
Thank you for pointing that out. There's also, we provide pupil transportation to private schools as well. So there are a number of expenses embedded in our budget that are actually for private school students.
And then any other board members a question? And just the budget, the strategic plan prioritization, what is that and when is that?
So that's something that we just began discussing in cabinet today. Those are, what are the strategic priorities, the major priorities we want to accomplish as part of the next budget. So could be, curriculum purchases. It could be alternative and changes to our transportation structure for pupil transportation. It could be academic programs. So Dr. Garrison?
Sure. And naturally, what we've already discussed is that what's on the table, which is the reconfiguration and a referenda. Continuing these conversations into next year will be very important. As we all know, our referenda is not just a one-phased approach. This will be, a two-phased approach, if one could argue that, because we have to get our facility study done to possibly look at additional debt moving forward down the road. And so we got the phase one of the referenda, and of course we possibly will have phase two of the referenda based on the will of the board to move forward with that. Naturally, we are, of course, definitely talking about reconfiguration and what that actually looks like moving into next year. Although we are currently where we are with the conversations, we know that our school families want to see something different. And so that is definitely where we are landing at for our strategic planning. Naturally, for me, it's only been 2 months, 2.5 months in this conversation. And so I know that this is going to be a continued conversation moving into the 2023-2024 school year.
Okay. All right. Thank you. Yep. That's good. All right. So we are now at 7A, future board meeting dates. Teaching, Learning, Equity, and Pupil Services, Tuesday, February 21st at 5:30 p.m. Human Resources, Tuesday, February 21st at 6:30 p.m. Our regular board meeting, Tuesday, February 21st at 7 p.m. Governance Committee meeting, Tuesday, February 28th at 6 p.m. And Policy Committee meeting, March 1st at 5:30 p.m. All right. We're now at 8. A motion may be made and a vote taken to convene the Board of Education in a closed session pursuant to Section 19.85, parentheses 1, parentheses C, relative to considering employment, promotion, compensation, or performance evaluation data of any public employee over which the governmental body has jurisdiction or exercises responsibility. Is there a motion?
So moved.
Second?
I'll second.
It's been moved by Board Member A. Levy and seconded by Board Member Brian Anderson. Is there any discussion? Hearing none, Mr. Shope, could we have a roll call vote, please?
Yes. Amy Levy?
Aye.
Brian Anderson?
Aye.
Joanne Winfield?
Aye.
Greg Schneider?
Aye.
Megan Miller?
Aye.
And Sean Levy.
Aye.
Motion carried unanimously.
All right, so we'll take some time, Megan, as we transition, and then we'll finish up. We will be adjourning from
Close.
So good evening and thank you.
Thanks.